Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're doing something really cool. We are going to build a cognitive toolkit so we can finally stop intervening blindly in complex systems.
So, have you ever rushed in to fix a problem, only to realize you somehow made it 1,000 times worse? Yeah, if you're nodding along right now, trust me, you are definitely not alone.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at why we always seem to solve the wrong problems. Then, we'll dive into first principles thinking, respecting Chesterton's fence, second-order thinking, the Cobra effect, and finally, navigating Goodhart's law. All right, let's just jump right in.
Part 1. Solving the wrong problem. It's basically the default human flaw.
You know, as humans, we just naturally rush to act. And why is that? Well, because doing something, literally anything, feels infinitely better than just sitting there in uncertainty. We tend to grab onto the very first issue that looks obvious. We default to those comfortable, familiar solutions instead of taking a step back to actually diagnose the real issue. And the crazy part, our confidence in what we're doing shoots way up long before we ever even test if we're actually right.
It's like a giant game of whack-a-mole. Just look at the difference between treating symptoms versus treating causes. Treating symptoms is that stressful, never-ending cycle of quick fixes. It feels productive, but it's not. On the flip side, treating the actual cause means doing the really hard work. Pausing, tolerating that annoying ambiguity, observing, and getting to the true heart of the matter. You literally have to be willing to sit in the discomfort of not knowing just to get it right.
Moving on to Part 2, First Principles Thinking. This is all about starting completely from scratch. So this entire method basically boils down to 3 really crucial steps. Number 1, identify your current assumptions. Number 2, break the problem all the way down into its fundamental truths. And number 3, create entirely new solutions from scratch. This is exactly, and I mean exactly, how SpaceX challenged the age-old assumption that rockets just had to be astronomically expensive. By breaking everything down to the raw materials, things like aluminum and titanium, they realized, wait a minute, we can build reusable rockets much cheaper in-house. It was an absolute game changer.
But hey, you don't have to be building rockets to use this. You can apply it every single day. Let's look at UX design, for instance. Instead of just assuming your users need, say, a better drop-down menu, first principles thinking makes you stop and ask, what is the core task this person is actually trying to accomplish? When you strip away all those built-in assumptions about the interface, you can build completely new, totally simplified shortcuts that are actually designed for the user.
All right, Part 3, Respecting Chesterton's fence. The golden rule here? Understand before you act. So Chesterton's fence is this brilliant classic warning. It basically says that you should never, ever remove a fence until you know exactly why it was put up in the first place. Think about it. Whatever already exists out there likely serves a very specific purpose. It might not be immediately obvious to you as an outsider, but fences don't just magically appear out of nowhere, right?
And this gives us a really fascinating distinction. You've got the reckless reformer who walks up and says, I don't see the use of this thing, let's just tear it down. But then you have the intelligent reformer who says, hold on, if you don't see the use of it, I am definitely not letting you clear it away. Go away, do your homework, and think about it. It doesn't matter if you're trying to flatten an outdated corporate hierarchy or just break a bad personal habit. You absolutely have to understand the underlying need it serves before you just sweep it away.
Which brings us to Part 4, second-order thinking. This is where we learn to ask, and then what?
Here's the deal. First-level thinking is super fast, but it's totally superficial. It solves the immediate problem right in front of you, like eating a giant chocolate bar because you're hungry right now. But second-level thinking, that is what separates the pros from the crowd. You deliberately hit pause and ask yourself, okay, and then what? You're forcing yourself to look past the immediate fix and consider the long-term subsequent consequences of that decision rippling across time and complex systems.
And if you don't do that, you end up in Part 5, the Cobra effect, the ultimate lesson in unintended consequences.
To really grasp this, let's take a quick trip back to colonial Delhi. The city had a rather terrifying problem on its hands. Way too many highly venomous cobras just slithering around the streets. So the government came up with what felt like a perfectly logical first-level solution. They offered a generous cash bounty for every dead cobra brought in. Problem solved, right?
Well, not exactly, because nobody stopped to ask, and then what? Instead of trudging around hunting wild snakes, the citizens got a little entrepreneurial. People actually started breeding cobras right in their own homes. They were essentially printing their own government bounty money. I mean, you kind of have to admire the hustle, but it was a total disaster for the policy.
So, of course, the authorities eventually caught on to the scam.
and they canceled the cash bounty. And what did the breeders do? The next logical thing. They took all these snakes, which were now completely worthless to them, and just released them straight back into the streets. Ultimately, Delhi was left with a massive, amplified cobra problem that was far, far worse than before the government ever stepped in.
And the wild thing is, we see this exact same human behavior absolutely everywhere. Take Mexico City, for example. They try to crack down on air pollution by banning certain cars on specific days. The unintended consequence? People just went out and bought cheap, incredibly dirty second cars so they could still drive on the restricted days. The smog actually got worse. Or think about payday lending laws. They're usually written to protect low-income borrowers, but they frequently end up forcing those exact same people into even more dangerous, unregulated, and expensive alternatives. People will always react to rules in ways lawmakers almost never see coming.
All right, final piece of the puzzle. Part 6, Navigating Goodhart's Law. Let's talk about measuring success accurately.
This brings us to an absolute light bulb moment, Goodhart's Law. It famously states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. This is a massive warning flag for all of us. The second a specific metric becomes your ultimate goal, let's say counting the number of sales calls made in a day, people are going to optimize purely for that metric, even if they completely destroy the actual business outcomes in the process.
It's the classic trap of activity metrics versus outcome metrics. Activity metrics, like racking up dozens of totally useless sales calls just to hit a quota, they create this really dangerous illusion of progress. You feel busy, but you aren't doing anything valuable. What we really need to be obsessing over are outcome metrics. We're talking about meaningful results like an actual increase in profitable revenue, or genuinely seeing process improvements get implemented across the team. The legendary management expert Peter Drucker hit the nail right on the head when he said, "There is surely nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency what should not be done at all." And it's so true, right? Being highly efficient is entirely meaningless if you're optimizing the wrong metric or solving the wrong problem.
So, let's wrap this up, your new cognitive toolkit. By bringing all these concepts together, using first principles to break problems down to their core, Chesterton's fence to respect the systems already in place, second-order thinking to look ahead and anticipate those ripple effects, and Goodhart's Law to make sure you're measuring real outcomes, you now have a cohesive, incredibly powerful framework for critical thinking. It is literally an upgraded operating system for your brain.
So I want to leave you with this one final thought. The very next time you find yourself staring down a massive, complex crisis, will you take the easy, comfortable path and just swat at the symptoms? Or will you have the courage to hit pause, pull out this toolkit, and do the hard work of solving the right problem? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Get out there and keep asking the right questions.